One mistake ruined everything. My husband doesn't want to see me after I had a fling, my coworker.
I only made one mistake. My husband dumped me after 10 years for one night stand with a coworker. Hey Reddit, using a throwaway account here because my usual one is known and followed by friends and family. We all mess up, right? I did, you did. It's part of being human. But why can't my husband forgive me for a one-time slip-up? It's killing me. We've been married for 10 years and he's calling it quits just because I had a fling with a coworker. It doesn't make sense, and I'm hurting bad. I know you're probably wondering how that happened, so I guess backstory first. My name is Lena, and I am a 35-year-old woman. I'm married to Raymond, a 36-year-old man. We live in the United States. I'm going to call my coworker Jeff for the duration of the story for the sake of privacy. We've been married for about 10 years now. Let's rewind a bit first. Raymond and I first met at a college party where we hit it off. After some dates, we decided to make it official and moved in together. Fast forward 3 years and we tied the knot. Raymond worked from home while I worked in an office. But funny enough, Raymond was pulling in about 4 times what I was, all from the comfort of our home, while I was clocking in at the office. Talk about a salary gap, right? LOL. Up until when I made my mistake, life had been a breeze. Our sex life was pretty active. When tackling bills and chores, the income gap between Raymond and me led to an 80-20 split for bills. He shouldered 80% and I covered 20%. As for chores, given Raymond's more flexible schedule working from home, the division leaned towards 70-30, with him taking on 70% and me handling 30%. It might sound a bit lopsided, but it played into my favor. Raymond insisted on this arrangement, wanting me to have ample rest and extra spending money. Also, there were no little ones running around just yet, but we were gearing up to give parenthood a shot in about a year. Either ways, about a month back, a fresh face joined the office. And you know, it's not uncommon for new folks to pop in and out. People switch jobs, offices shuffle, the usual drill. But this time was a bit different. This new coworker turned heads. Like, really turned heads. The whole office was buzzing about their good looks. I found myself crushing on this new colleague right from the get-go. But honestly, I thought it was just a mild crush. You know, the kind that fades away with time. Ignoring the crush seemed like the logical move. But let me tell you, it was a Herculean task. This coworker, not only good-looking but also exuding friendliness, went the extra mile in the friendliness department, especially with me. I attempted the classic avoidance strategy, but truth be told, it was like trying to dodge raindrops. Almost impossible. Instead of fading, the crush decided to play on expert mode, growing stronger with each passing day. Honestly, it got to a point where it was messing with my head. And then, as if the universe wasn't on my side, Jeff wanted a transfer to my office. When I heard that, talk about shockwaves. This was the person I was actively trying to dodge. And yet, here they were, making a beeline to get closer to me. Sadly enough, my husband, sharp as a tack, noticed I was kind of pulling away. No secrets there, but instead of letting things slide, he went all out to make up for it. Like he could sense things changing and wanted to fix it, you know? He wasn't having any of that distance creeping in, so he started doing things. Little surprises, more hangout time. I felt this heavy guilt weighing me down. On one side, there was my husband, trying his best to keep our connection tight. And there I am, crushing on some young coworker. The guilt gnawed at me. So I made a promise to myself. No more wandering eyes, no more letting dumb crushes mess with what I've got with my husband. But Jeff just wouldn't let up. He started bringing me coffee all the time, stopping by to chat more with me than anyone else. It got pretty obvious, to be honest. Then came the compliments, not just on my work, but on how I looked and what I wore. Can't lie. It felt nice. In the middle of all my confusion, his attention became like this boost of confidence. He always delivered the compliments with a charming smile, and it turned into a kind of craving for more. I started questioning myself. Was it really so bad to enjoy a bit of attention? I mean, it's just harmless, right? But deep down, I knew things were getting a bit blurry. The line between friendly and maybe not so friendly was fading, but I was starting not to care. Work, which used to be all about getting stuff done, started to become a happy place for me just because of him. Every chat with him left me kinda jittery but strangely excited. And as his attention kept coming, I found myself getting caught up in this emotional mess, trying to balance my commitment to my marriage and the buzz of this newfound attention. His actions started to mess with my everyday life. I couldn't stop thinking about our interactions, replaying them in my head. It was like this secret compartment opened up, and I couldn't really control it. And then one day, picture this. I'm leaving work, minding my own business, and bam! There's Jeff, casually chilling next to my car. Caught me off guard, gotta admit, but being the curious cat I am, I walked over. He shoots me that smile. You know, the one that feels like 100 butterflies doing somersaults in your stomach? Yeah, that one. Then he surprises me, says he's got something on his mind, something he wants to chat about. And get this, he's actually asking if it's cool to message me after work. Flattered much? Well, guilty as charged, I said yes. I got back home, and I was burning with curiosity about what Jeff wanted to talk about. My phone practically became an extension of my hand. I was checking it every few minutes. My curiosity got so thick even my hubby noticed. However, I quickly deflected and told him I was waiting for my best friend's text. Then, surprisingly, my husband suggests a random date night since I got off work early. I'm like, sure, why not? We hit up a nice dinner spot, Netflix, and chill for a bit, and call it a night. Just as I'm about to doze off, bingo. The coworker's message finally pops up. My excitement was so crazy that I almost dropped my phone, LOL. I had a chat with Jeff, the usual how's it going stuff. He throws me a curveball, however, and he said something was bugging him. I was thinking, did I annoy him or what? But then again, he's usually the one giving me the extra attention. So I'm like, spill the beans, what's eating at you? And bam, he hits me with it. He's seriously into me. Talk about blindsided. I'm left speechless and caught off guard. I shoot back with the obvious, does he know I'm married? He does. And he said that just makes the whole thing even more confusing for him. He spills that he really, really likes me, but says he gets it if I want to cut ties. I was feeling like I got hit by a truck. Here I was, relentlessly crushing on him, thinking he would never like someone like me, and shocking enough, he likes me. I tell him I need time to process, so I ask for a few days. Then I bail offline. My emotions are all over the place. Shock, confusion, and a hint of flattery. Another thing that surprises me is the fact that our workplace isn't a tiny shop, and Jeff is like the office heartthrob. Everyone's fave and easy on the eyes. Plenty of girls, single ones too, are crushing on him. So, the big question hanging in the air? Why me? Out of the whole bunch, why single me out, especially when you know I'm married? I was all kinds of confused, seriously lost in this mess. After dragging myself to bed, I decided to let it marinate for a few days, hoping some clarity would magically appear. Surprise, surprise, things just got messier. Instead of the attraction fading, it cranked up a notch. I felt like I was stuck in some emotional maze. I knew I had to squash this attraction, but how the heck do you do that? Looking back, it hits me that I kind of set myself up for this whole mess. When he started with the niceness, I could have just put my foot down and told him to knock it off. I mean, he probably would have listened, or I could have gone the official route and reported it to HR, they'd handle it. But no, I went the selfish route, soaking up the attention like it was some kind of personal spotlight. I enjoyed that it made the other girls at work a bit green-eyed. Then, when he dropped the bomb about liking me, I had a chance to shut it down right then and there. All I had to do was tell him to back off because, hello, I'm married. He might have listened, but nope. I pulled a move straight out of a teenage romance movie. Instead of shutting it down, I asked for a few days to think it over. Like, seriously? I've got to give the guy credit. He at least gave me those few days to ponder. The coffee deliveries kept coming, the smiles persisted, but hey, at least he eased up on the clinginess. It was like he was on standby, waiting for my decision, but not as in-your-face as before. I mulled over this whole situation for days, to the point where my husband couldn't help but notice I was in my head about something. Of course, I couldn't spill the beans to him, so I did what any person in a tight spot would, deflected and told a little white lie. But then, out of the blue, I had this wild idea. Call it crazy, call it absurd, but here it is. I somehow convinced myself that the reason I was so attracted to Jeff was because, well, I hadn't done anything with him. Like, really? My genius deduction was that if I just slept with him, the attraction would fizzle out and I'd move on with my life. Now, looking back, I can't believe how downright foolish that plan was. At the time, though, I thought I had it all figured out, a foolproof strategy. Keep it hush-hush from my husband, kiss the crush goodbye, and focus on fixing up the marriage. Talk about a seriously misguided train of thought. It's crystal clear now, that idea was beyond stupid. But back in the moment, it felt like some genius master plan. Looking back, I can't believe how ridiculously dumb I was. The reality is, I was just so damn attracted to Jeff that I was practically searching for an excuse to act on it. So what did I do? Well, brace yourself for the cringe. I messaged Jeff and was pretty straightforward with him. I told him I'd pondered it for a bit, and nope, I wasn't leaving my husband because I loved him very much and wanted to stay with him. And then, I proposed the brilliant idea of I and the coworker having something on the side. And guess what? Jeff's response? Pure enthusiasm. He didn't expect me to ditch my husband, but he was thrilled that I wanted him. Yeah, it's as cringeworthy as it sounds. I made sure I laid it out straight for him, no strings attached, just a one-night stand. Shockingly, he was on board. I mean, who wouldn't be, right? So Jeff and I planned everything. The rendezvous was scheduled at his place in 2 days, a Friday. In my twisted logic, it seemed like a genius plan. And honestly, at that moment, I was feeling this mix of happiness and eagerness. My crush on this guy was like a stubborn weed, but I reminded myself that the love for my husband was equally strong. All I wanted was for this crush to be overdone and dusted. It was time to put an end to it, so I could then focus on my marriage. The next day, I woke up buzzing with excitement. Friday couldn't come soon enough. I got ready for work. I was like a ball of anticipation, even though I noticed my husband was in a foul mood. I brushed it off, not giving it much thought. Once at work, Jeff was extra nice to me, going the extra mile by treating me to coffee and lunch. Honestly, I felt very guilty, but I was too caught up in the excitement to let it bother me. Friday finally rolled around, and sleep was basically a no-show for me. As I got ready for work, I noticed my husband was in an extra foul mood. Yet again, I brushed it off, figuring he must have had some work troubles on his plate. In hindsight, I can't believe how insensitive I was. Instead of checking in and asking what was up, I just carried on, oblivious to his feelings. My mind was too wrapped up in the excitement of what I was about to do. Once at work, Jeff was back at it. Extra nice, coffee, lunch, the whole shebang. The guilt was there in the background, but honestly, I was too deep into my own thrill to care about anything else. Looking back now, it's like a cringeworthy movie scene where I watch the main character, which is me, make all the wrong choices. Once work was done, me and the coworker decided to be sneaky about it. We hung back until most of our colleagues had hit the road, so nobody would catch on to us leaving together. We decided that we would drive separate cars. He would be at the front while I would drive behind him, keeping things low-key to dodge any curious looks from our coworkers and any potential sightings from anybody that knew me. We made it to his place without a hitch. I slipped in unnoticed. That was a big relief. For a moment, I thought I might actually pull this off smoothly. We settled in, caught a movie, had some food, and then things got more intimate. And let me tell you, it was mind-blowing, like next-level amazing. Part of it, I think, was just the built-up desire for this coworker. It was fantastic. After we wrapped it up, we decided to chill and watch another movie. During the movie, I spotted a text from my husband asking if I was done. It caught me off guard, but then I figured he was just checking if I finished work. I guessed he might have a date night planned, explaining his question. I replied that I still had a few hours left, but he was cool with it and said he'd be waiting for me. After the movie, I figured it was time to head out. Jeff walked me to my car. As it was an unfamiliar neighborhood, he assured me that it was safe, as I probably didn't know anyone around, and that was true. We chatted on the way to the car, and I made it clear that I didn't want our workplace interactions to get awkward because of this one-night stand. He agreed, saying he still wanted us to be friends. I emphasized that this wouldn't be a repeat, and he was cool with whatever I decided. I drove home and used the spare key since my husband wasn't there. Figured he had gone out for something. I did the usual routine, ate, showered, changed, and waited for my husband. Jeff sent me a message and we chatted for a bit. We even discussed the intimacy, reflecting on how intense it had been. When my husband finally arrived, he mentioned that he had been hanging out at his friends. He had dinner alone since I'd already eaten. Then we watched TV and chatted before hitting the hay. Overall, a pretty regular night. The next morning, I woke up a bit later than usual and had to rush to get ready. I noticed my husband was in a really bad mood, but with me about to be late for work, I didn't get a chance to ask about it. I made it to work on time, thankfully. However, something hit me when I got there. The intense attraction I had for Jeff had just vanished into thin air. Sure, he was still attractive, but that overwhelming crush was gone. It felt like it had evaporated, and I even felt guilty about cheating on my husband with him. Despite that, we were still friendly, bantering and chatting. He still made sure to bring me coffee and lunch, and the day carried on as usual. What seemed like a decent day took a nosedive when I got home. Parked in the driveway, came down from the car, and bam, there were my things on the porch. My clothes, my stuff, just laid out there. I was beyond confused. Why were my belongings outside? Attempted to use the spare key to get in since it seemed my husband wasn't home. But shocker, the key wasn't working. My husband had changed the locks. I attempted to reach him through calls, knocks on the window and door, and a barrage of texts, but it was evident he wasn't home. After about 30 minutes of standing on the porch with my things, I finally received a message from my husband. In it, he revealed that he knew about my one-night stand with my coworker and made it clear that I was no longer welcome in our home. He instructed me to gather my things and leave. The shock hit me like a freight train. It felt like everything crashed into my brain at once, and tears started streaming down my face. My husband knew, and he had been acting like he didn't. I tried calling him repeatedly, but he refused to answer. Instead, he sent me screenshots of the conversation between the coworker and me, telling me to exit his life. He called me a betrayer, expressing that he would never forgive me. He said I disgusted him and wanted nothing to do with me. He made it clear that divorce was inevitable. He accused me of lying to him. He told me that he knew about my attraction to the coworker even before the one-night stand. I couldn't hold back the tears. If he had known about my feelings for the coworker, why did he allow me to go through with it? It all hit me like a tidal wave of surprise. I had been excited to get back home to unwind after work, and now it has turned into getting kicked out of my own home. After 10 years, my husband was tossing everything aside, all because I had a one-night stand with a coworker I was attracted to. The sadness mingled with anger. Why did he let me go through with it? I continued crying, and my tears flowed even more freely. As I packed up my belongings, I realized there was nothing I could do. So I headed to my parents' house, hoping they could intervene and persuade my husband to let me back into his life. As I packed my belongings, tossed them into the car, and headed to my parents' house, a lingering hope clung to the idea that I could explain things before my husband reached out to them. Unfortunately, he beat me to it. Before I even arrived, my phone erupted with calls and messages. Curious, I checked my phone only to discover my husband had executed the classic exposé move. He created a group chat, adding me, all my friends, my parents, his parents, and even all my siblings and his siblings, then proceeded to post the screenshots of my conversation with Jeff. I was beyond frustrated. My phone was blowing up with messages from my husband's family, calling me a cheater, betrayer, disloyal, and tossing around all sorts of insults. It got so overwhelming that I had to switch off my phone to escape the sadness those messages brought. When I finally got to my parents' place, they naturally wanted to know what went down. They couldn't kick out their own kid, but they were pretty mad. They scolded me for wrecking my marriage over a fling, putting all the blame on me. I didn't mind though, at least I had a roof over my head. I crashed at my parents' place for a few days to cool off. Following their suggestion, they had suggested I rest for a few days and give my husband time to cool down. After a few days, my parents, my siblings, and I decided to face my husband and stage an intervention. Even though he wasn't thrilled to see us, he let us in out of respect for my parents. We had some drinks, and then the real talk began. My parents apologized for my screw-up, letting him know I felt genuinely sorry. They spun a story about the coworker supposedly seducing me and how it wasn't really my fault, but my husband wasn't hearing any of it. My husband wasn't buying their story. He pretty much kicked all of us out, threatening to do it himself if we didn't leave. He made it clear that divorce was inevitable, and the papers would be ready in a few days. Despite my attempts to cry and plead, it didn't sway him. We were all ushered out, back to square one. It felt like everything happened in a blink. How did I go from a seemingly happy marriage to crashing at my parents' house? It all unfolded so fast, without even a chance to catch a break. I really wish my husband had confronted me when he first saw the text messages. Why did he let me proceed with the one-night stand? If he had found out sooner, maybe we could have fixed things, but now we were on the path to divorce. I started blaming Jeff for everything. I was content in my marriage until he entered the picture. I am here to confess my mistake, and I am now learning my lesson, and I have learned that cheating can never lead to something good. I was letting my affair partner come over to my house after my husband left for work, and at the end of the day, my affair partner started stealing from me and also tried to set up his sister with my husband. I cannot believe that my affair partner will secretly set up his sister with my husband and make her take my place. And now my husband and I are about to get a divorce. That is because he is accusing me of stealing the valuable stuff in the house, and he is also seeing my affair partner's sister now. He also knows that I've been letting my affair partner into the house. My name is Martha, and I am a 26-year-old housewife. The name of my husband is Edward, and he is 45 years old. He is a businessman, and Edward and I got married because our families were very close and they thought we were the perfect couple. Edward took me out on a couple of dates before he had me to be his girlfriend. Our relationship grew, and a few months later, we got married. Edward didn't allow me to work because his family had thought that I couldn't have time for the house if I was working, and so that's how I became a housewife. I didn't have any particular work that I was doing at that time, so it was easy for me to follow his lead. His family was emphasizing on us having children early, but I didn't give it any thought because I wasn't ready. But since Edward was in his 40s, they thought it was time he had children. I was always alone in the house all by myself, and I got used to it. As time went on, I became bored staying at home, and I wanted some sort of entertainment. I found that entertainment in Drake. I ran into Drake at the farmer's market one day, and since then we have been seeing each other. Drake and I got to know each other so well. I found out that we had a lot in common. He was my escape from all the boredom I was feeling alone in the house. He was a very funny person. He always made me laugh anytime I was feeling bored. My husband was not always around. He was always on one business trip or the other. I actually got used to it, but as a young woman, I needed a man that was close to my age, who could understand what I wanted. I needed a young man, and Drake was the one. Drake took it upon himself to do everything for me. It was the little things that he did that made me fall for him. He could open the door for me. He could help me around the house. Overall, he was doing things that my husband was not doing for me. Edward was old, and moreover, he was always on a trip or the other. Few weeks after I met Drake, he took me out on a date. We bonded a lot, and we had a lot in common. Drake was a very attentive person. He noticed the little things. And most of all, he was my age, so he understood me well. Drake didn't tell me what he did for a living, and I never understood why. I should have known better that he was a scam. He always used to tell me he had problems with his credit card, and I mostly paid for what we usually ate. I never saw it as something bad until now. Drake and I continued seeing each other for some months, and since my husband was not always around, he didn't notice, and I was happy about it because I saw something that was keeping me busy after a long time. I was always inviting Drake over to my house for us to spend quality time together. I never liked being seen in public because my husband knew a lot of people and I was afraid I could run into them. And so I avoided public places and settled for my house. In my house, Drake and I were trying new things. He taught me how to dance. I have always wanted to dance. He taught me a lot about his likes and dislikes. Drake could come over and I could prepare food for him. We could watch movies, have fun, and be happy. It went on for a while, and by that time, Drake and I started dating. We dated for a while, and he introduced me to his sister, Dora. Dora was very nice to me, and I liked her. I thought Dora was so much like me, but more bold. She could do anything she wanted, and I was jealous. Dora took me out shopping a couple of times, and she got me clothes that, according to her, I should be wearing. She boosted my self-confidence because I thought I didn't have a good body. But I didn't know all this had been done in order for me to warm up to them and for them to exploit me. They often come over to my house sometimes, and we do a lot of fun activities together. We played games and watched movies together. I often cuddle up with Drake, and Dora could always say we were such a cute couple. I could always blush because I had her approval, and it meant a lot to me. I didn't know that whenever Drake came over to my place, he was stealing something from my home. Drake was secretly doing things behind my back, and I was not aware. My husband got back from one of his numerous trips one day, and I was in the kitchen preparing food for him when he called for me. I was thinking it was just one of those days where he didn't know where he kept his watch. I went to meet him in the living room, and he told me he could not find the cash he dropped in his drawer. I told him I didn't see any money. Maybe he had spent it and he forgot. But he insisted he had dropped money there. I ended up convincing him he didn't drop any money there because if there was, I could have seen it. He ate his breakfast and promised to return early from work today, saying he was taking me out. I had plans with Drake and I had to cancel because anytime Edward was around, we don't usually see each other at all in order to avoid being caught. I did some house chores, and before I knew it, it was time for me to prepare for the dinner Edward was taking me to. I got dressed and we left. Edward always tried his best for me, and I always felt like it was never enough. Used to think that he didn't understand me because we weren't in the same age bracket. We ate dinner and he told me he was going to be around for the next couple of weeks. He had said that he had some time to spare before his next trip. I was very sad about it because I knew I was not going to see Drake for a long time. I faked being happy in order for him not to suspect that I wasn't happy. In the period that Edward was around, we visited our family members, mostly Edward's. He was very close to them. I didn't like them because anytime they saw me, they were always talking about me having children. Don't get me wrong, I wanted children, but not now. Edward was always on work trips, and I didn't want to raise children all by myself. But they didn't understand that, so I normally stayed far away from them. I was only close to Edward's mother, Edna. Edna was like a mother to me. She was part of the reason why I got married to Edward. She has these motherly hugs and care she usually gives me. It makes me feel at home, and she usually makes food and sends them to me once in a while. Whenever I needed someone to talk to, she was there. Edna was a blessing to me because I felt like she even liked me more than her own son. Whenever Edward and I had problems, she could be on my side, and I always appreciated her for it. Edward didn't stay for long before he was called for a trip and he left. I was very happy the morning he left, and I went straight to call Drake to come over. Drake and I had a good time. I even went on a spa date with Dora. We went to the beach. I was back to being fully happy again. There were days that I drank and slept over at my house. We decided to leave for a weekend getaway a few days after Edward left. We went to a town where nobody knew us, and so we were free to do whatever. We got back home, and it was not long when Edward came back from his trip. Once again, he discovered that things were missing in the house which I didn't notice. I also discovered that my set of jewelries were also missing, but I didn't know how to explain it to Edward. He accused me of stealing from him. I was shocked because he was accusing me of something I didn't do. I could steal from my own house again. It went on for a while, and it was becoming too much. I spoke to Drake about it so that he could help me find solutions to the problem and how we could get who was stealing from us. He told me that I shouldn't drop my keys under the doormat again, and that I should be giving it to him in order for him to keep things safe in the house. I didn't know I was giving the key to my house to the thief himself. Whenever my husband was around, Dora could come over and we could talk sometimes. We did things together, and I didn't know that she had eyes for my husband. She could come over with clothes that were too revealing, and I never saw it as anything for a day. Looking back on it, I wished I had said something to her or stopped her from coming to the house. She could move around in front of my husband, serve him food, and do things for him. I thought she was just caring. Unknown to me that she had already made plans with her brother in order for them to snatch my husband away from me because they thought he had money, and I was in their way of getting it. Drake and Dora hatched their plan well, and I let them into my house. Dora got close to my husband, and I didn't know until it was too late. At that point, Dora was already seeing my husband secretly. He was giving her money and buying her gifts, things he didn't buy for me. He took her on different trips, and I didn't know. Unknown to me, I was still in a relationship with her brother. Drake and I continued to see each other, and whenever I was with Drake, Dora was with my husband. It went on for a while. Whenever my husband comes back from those trips, he was always angry with me for doing one thing or the other. We usually fight a lot since he started seeing Dora. I didn't know that Dora was instigating my husband against me. Drake could steal things from my house, and my husband could blame me, saying I was the thief. I didn't know that my husband had taken my house problem to Dora to discuss. Dora had told him I was the one stealing those items and using the money for my personal benefits. My husband could come home and start saying all manner of things to me. I was very confused, and there were days I could cry myself to sleep. After some time, the stealing stopped, and I didn't know it stopped because Edward was around and I was not letting Drake into my house. Edward and I were not particularly on good terms. We went about our normal lives for some time, and I found out that Edward had changed in a lot of ways. He was not paying attention to me like usual. I knew we weren't that cuddly couple, but I knew something wasn't right. He went out at night and stayed up late. He comes back home drunk, and sometimes he doesn't come at all. He made late-night calls, and that got me really worried. I decided to follow him one day in order for me to find out what was going on. I saw him entering a restaurant with a woman, but when I confronted him about it, he told me it was just a business partner he took to lunch to thank her for work. And I didn't believe him because I knew Edward, he didn't know how to lie. I talked to Drake and Dora about what was going on with Edward, and they told me to not think too much into it, that it might just be nothing. They made me believe something was wrong with me, and I should stop thinking about what wasn't there. Unknown to me, they were the ones doing everything. My relationship with Drake continued, and I always felt at peace with him. And I was thinking we should move to the next stage because I saw him as a genuine person who loved me. But every time I brought it up, he could find something to say that it wasn't the right time, and that when the time was right, it could happen. I believed him because I thought he needed time. But I was wrong. Few days after Drake left my house came back and started complaining again. But this time I was tired, and I decided to install cameras in my house without anyone knowing. I didn't tell Drake because I knew he could talk me out of it. So I installed cameras and waited for who was stealing from me to strike again. The first day, I didn't see anything, and I kept waiting, but no one suspicious came into the house. It took time for me to discover that Drake was the one stealing from me. I caught Drake on the camera taking something from my husband's drawer and putting it in his pocket. I didn't want to believe it. I felt used. I started crying because I allowed a thief into my house and I thought he was a saint. I even went to him with my problems in order for him to help me. Unknown to me that my enemies were very close. I never for once suspected that it was Drake that was stealing from me. I didn't know how I was going to explain to my husband that it was my affair that was stealing from us all this while. How was I going to explain it? After a few days of ignoring Drake's call, I finally made up my mind to speak to him. I decided was not to allow a thief into my house again. I met up with him at a cafe. I showed him the video and he didn't deny it. I was very surprised. I threatened to report him to the police for stealing from me, but he said if I did, he was going to expose me to my husband, and I didn't want that. Drake wasn't the man I met a few months back. He had totally changed the man I spent a lot of my time with, and couldn't have threatened me that way. He said he had videos he was going to send to my husband if I didn't let him go. I cried out of the cafe and I never looked back. I got home and I saw a message from Drake threatening me to do exactly what he wanted. He extorted me a great deal. He asked me to take money from my husband, which I did. I was seriously blackmailed by the person I thought was my supposed affair. I gave Drake a lot of money, and countless times I had explained to him that it could be a problem if my husband found out, but he didn't listen to me. After countless extortions from Drake, my husband finally found out that his money was missing. He called me and asked him what I had been doing with the huge amount of money I was taking. I didn't know how to explain to him that I was being blackmailed by the man I had an affair with, because I knew it would end my marriage. Since I didn't have a good explanation for the money, my husband decided to report to our family members that I was a thief and that I had been stealing from the house. I had to explain to them that I used the money to buy some personal stuff, so I was able to buy myself some time. They didn't ask me further, and I was glad. A few weeks later, I saw my husband with Dora in a restaurant holding hands intimately. It was then I became aware that it had been their plan to destroy my marriage. I couldn't go straight and confront them because I was also guilty, and if exposed, it could ruin my marriage. I met up with Dora to stop seeing my husband, but she refused. These people were out to destroy me, and I was the one that bought them. I discovered that all along it was Dora that my husband had been seeing secretly. I should have known better. It all made sense now. A few days later, I was doing everything within my power to keep things away from my husband. But since he was with Dora, I was always afraid he was going to find out one way or the other. Drake didn't leave me alone. He kept on taking money from me and I didn't know what to do. They claimed they had a video of me and Drake together and they threatened to show my husband. At some point, I had to stop giving Drake money. My husband had cleared out the money that was in the account. I became helpless and Drake kept on blackmailing me. But at that point, I was tired and I didn't have any more money to give again. I began selling out all the valuable things I had, but it wasn't enough. Dora finally exposed me to my husband after I refused to give them money. My husband was very angry at me. He found out that I was cheating on him with someone. I had to explain to him that I was set up by these people, but he didn't believe me because Dora had already fed him with enough lies about me. I kept begging Edward to listen to me that I was set up, but he didn't hear me. My husband kept on talking about what I did, but he was still the one in a relationship with Dora. I didn't see the difference, but then again, I was fooled by them. So I knew he was also being fooled, and I tried to open his eyes to see the reality, but I wasn't heard. My husband asked me to pack out of the house because I cheated on him, and at that point, everything came crashing down on me. I was going to be homeless, I didn't have money, and I had sold my valuables to get money for Drake. I didn't know where to go. I got to my mother's old house hoping that Edward had a change of heart somehow. But it never happened. I went to his parents' house in order for them to speak to Edward to forgive me. But they turned me away, calling me all sorts of names and how I was a thief who had been stealing and cheating on their son. Few days later, I was given divorce papers that were already signed by Edward. I cried my eyes out because I had lost something good I had. I lost my marriage. I was looking for something that wasn't going to last. Now I have lost my husband to Dora and Drake. I shouldn't have cheated on Edward. He was everything a woman should want, but I was being greedy instead of me. To make my marriage work, I went after someone who was finally my downfall. Update. Hello guys, so right now my husband and I finalized the divorce. He made sure to painfully drag things out. He left me without a penny. I was fine with that because honestly, it was never about the money with me. I tried to explain to him the kind of person Dora and her brother were, but he never listened. I regretted what I did back then. I shouldn't have cheated on my husband. I even brought my affair partner to my house, which was very wrong. I started working at a restaurant as a waitress now because what had happened taught me a lesson that I needed to have my own money. And most importantly, I am depending on myself now. It wasn't easy, but I was trying my best. A few weeks ago, I heard that Dora and Drake ran away with money belonging to Edward. I felt pity for him only because I was human. I did warn him about them, but he didn't listen. He always said I was jealous. Right now, I made some friends who were showing me to the right path in life, and I am so happy to have them. I am always glad anytime I remember that I never gave in to the pressure of having children with Edward, because it could have been so much more complicated with children. A few days back, I went to Edward's place to check up on him, because I also heard he was in a very bad place. And when I got there, he chased me out, blaming me for being the reason for his problems. I understood where he was coming from. I was the one that brought Dora and Drake into our family, and they destroyed us beyond repair. Looking back, I know I disappointed a lot of people, especially Edna, Edward's mother. When she found out, she was very devastated. I couldn't look her in the face anymore. She was everything one could want in a mother, and the fact that she took me as her daughter and I did this to her makes what I did 1,000,000 times worse. Right now, she isn't talking to me and I can't even reach her anymore. She has distanced herself from me ever since. I shouldn't have cheated. I regret what I did because I hurt the people who I loved and also the people who loved me. The relationship I thought was gold and I was running after turned out to be dust. Drake never liked me. He carefully planned to milk me of my husband's money. He never loved me. Dora was just like her brother. She wasn't genuine like I thought. Everything they did, said to me was calculated, and I was a fool for falling into their trap. I should have known better.